Thank you very much for coming. My name is Shoaib and I am a volunteer for MEND and the chair of the working group in Birmingham. MEND is an organisation that aims to tackle Islamophobia, particularly around empowering the Muslim community around media and politics. Fundamentally, it's important that we as a Muslim community work with the candidates to establish kind of what their policies are at the time of a general election, and to see how best they are going to represent us as a community and support us and ask those questions that are pertinent to us as a community. So today we've got the Lib Dem candidate, Jenny Wilkinson, coming to speak to us today. We do have some questions that we'll put to you in a second, but do you want to start with just telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about kind of
Yeah, sure. No, that's great, and thanks so much for having me. It's great to be able to talk to you today. So I'll start off with just a bit of a, sort of my personal background, and then talk a bit about sort of my key kind of policy areas. So I live in Sutton Coldfield, which is where I grew up, and I'm now sort of bringing up my own family here. So I've been know the West Midlands region pretty well. In terms of politics, I'm actually quite new to politics. So in my background, I'm an accountant. I specialise in forensic accountancy, which involves kind of investigating fraud and corruption. So for me, that kind of integrity and honesty and openness is really important to me, and that's something I kind of bring with me into politics as well. I've been involved with the Liberal Democrats for about 5 years, and the reason I got involved in politics is to actually make a difference in my community. And it's really, I spent years like everybody else shouting at the TV and the radio and kind of complaining about things, and I thought, right, it's about time I actually stood up and did something about it, which is why I kind of got involved in politics. And in terms of why the Liberal Democrats, I just found a very close alignment between my own personal values and the Liberal Democrat values, which are very much around empowering the individual, supporting the individual, and enabling everybody to make the most of their lives and to really achieve, what they can in life. And that's very important to me, alongside valuing community and working in our communities and working with people to make all our communities better. So locally in Sutton Coldfield, I've been involved in a number of community things. I'm involved in our Friends of Sutton Park group, which looks after the natural assets. I'm a school governor in the town, and I'm also trustee of a charity which was set up originally to save our local library, and now runs sort of educational events in the library, but educational and cultural events really. So yeah, lots going on there. And in terms of the role of mayor, I really just see this as an opportunity to expand out and look over the whole region. We've got such an amazing region in the West Midlands. We've got a great history of manufacturing. We've got brilliant universities and research institutes and educational institutes, and we've got such a wonderful diverse community. And it's important to me that we really celebrate that diversity and really help everybody to contribute to our community across the West Midlands. So in terms of the campaign, and not just campaign, really my approach as mayor, I've kind of got 3 principles that I'm adopting rather than going into detailed policy. My principles, the first one is around empowering people and communities. So for me, it's very much about not just being a politician who stands there and tells you what I think. It's about listening to people and engaging with people. And that's why events like this are so important to me, is it actually gives me the opportunity to actually hear from people, because I've only got my own lived experience, which is limited to what I've grown up with and what I know. And so I can only find out what other people's experiences are and what's important to you and what your ideas and suggestions are about how we make the West Midlands better for us all. So listening to people is really key. Second priority is around tackling poverty and inequality in the region. And there's a lot of underlying problems, and I think these have come to light over the last year with the pandemic. But it's not that the pandemic has caused these inequalities and caused these differences. It's that there's underlying poverty and inequality in our society across the West Midlands. And so I really want to get to the root of that and tackle that and make sure, it's unacceptable that in, one of the richest countries in the world, we have people, sleeping on the streets. We have families who are being moved around to temporary accommodation. We have people who cannot feed their children, cannot heat their homes. So tackling that underlying poverty is really critical. And then finally, the other aspect is around the green economy and nature, and protecting both in terms of the climate emergency and also the biodiversity emergency, that we need to protect our green spaces and our natural spaces. And I think everyone over the last year has really appreciated, where they can get out and see some greenery. And, so for me, I'm very lucky that I've got a nice garden. For other people, they haven't. And so we need to have those green spaces everywhere across the region so that everyone has access to that nature and the kind of well-being that brings. So that's my kind of overriding introduction, and then I'm happy just to chat about your questions and discuss those further.
That's great, thank you for that. And I think it's really important that we have, like we've said already, but it's really important that we have that two-way conversation. So like I said, I really appreciate you attending today. So we'll crack on with the questions. And so these questions are kind of from the Muslim community and in and around issues that are relevant to the Muslim community. So the first question that I've got here today is, it's well documented that hatred and attacks against Muslims have significantly increased over the years. Will you commit to setting up a body that includes Muslim organizations that are representative to review the support provided to Muslim victims and support and improve actions against perpetrators?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And I think it comes down to, I think that this point I touched on earlier, around actually listening to people and engaging people at a very local level, because I think there can be a bit of a tendency for politicians at all levels to kind of say, oh, right, this is the answer, this is the solution. And, but we find those solutions better when we actually work with people in the community and actually understand what the challenges are that we're facing. And it's really sad and disappointing and frustrating that we're actually seeing an increase in hate crime. We all want to see Britain to be this great tolerant country, and we've moved away from that. And I think in recent years this divide is just growing, and we're just seeing just so much more sort of intolerance and kind of us and them kind of, and it's sort of caused by, I don't know, the political system and the culture in the country seems to we've just become more divided, and that's really sad. And so we need to be tackling the hate crime that's going on and making sure that we're putting things in place to support and protect people. And we need to be looking at the underlying sort of cultural factors that have caused this division in our society. And I think it's around, there's an important piece around just understanding each other better and meeting. So I want to find opportunities to bring different people from different backgrounds together and talk and engage. And when we understand each other better, we then realize that the differences are not what people think and are not as great as we think. So I think this sort of kind of nationalistic, anti-foreigner kind of prejudice that's really coming out over the last few years it's really sad, and it's really awful, and it's not the Britain that I want our country to be. So we need to really look at how we can make our country a lot more accepting. And I was really frustrated around the Sill report that came out a couple of weeks ago, saying there's no, racism's not a problem in the UK, and that is just not, in my experience and from people I'm talking to, that's just not borne out by the situation on the ground for many people who are experiencing, and it is, day-to-day racism in the street and in public, but also in our institutions. There is, barriers to progression and differences in people's experiences in dealing with healthcare and education system and in work. So it's just frustrating to say, well, no, race isn't a problem, when, you know, clearly for people on the ground that it really is.
That's great, thank you for that. And just to touch on a little bit of clarification, so would you be committed to setting up a representative body to look at the impact on the victims and to take action against perpetrators?
Yeah, to do that, yeah.
And just obviously the ins and outs of it we can work out kind of in the future, but just wanted to clarify that that is something that you would be committed to.
Yes, yeah.
So moving on to the next question. So many mosques closed voluntarily to stop the spread of COVID-19. Mosques are run entirely on donations from worshippers. As a result, many mosques are now facing significant difficulties due to not being able to collect donations. Mosques also do not receive any financial grants like businesses. Will you commit to look at offering mosques that are financially struggling support to be able to stay open?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important that our community organisations are supported, and the government nationally has you know, they've done a lot in supporting people during the pandemic, but not everybody. And so so as you say, mosques and places of worship, it's again an issue for the charity sector more widely that's reliant on donations is struggling with that, and also actually certain parts of the private sector business, in terms of small businesses, entrepreneurs, freelancers, you know, people who are kind of working for themselves and things, have not been well supported as bigger businesses and organizations. So yes, I think it's critical that we make sure that funding is provided for, you know, these important parts of our community. So yes, absolutely, to support the mosques, because I think that the structure and support that they give to the community and to people in the community is absolutely critical. So it's so vital that they're supported. So yes, that is something I will look at.
Moving on to the next question. Again, COVID-19 has hit Muslims hardest, with Asian and Arab communities suffering disproportionately risk in terms of high mortality. This has highlighted health inequalities faced by Muslims. Will you commit to working with relevant bodies to put into place actions to address the health inequalities faced by Muslims, particularly in the West Midlands?
Yeah. So I mean, that's right. And as I touched on in my introduction, you know, it's really shocking to see the disparities across our different communities, and poverty and health inequalities more broadly is really a key factor here. So it isn't just about COVID, it's just showing this underlying issue with health between different people across the country, and you know, and where you live can have such an impact on the outcomes for people. And so it's just not we need to just not see it as this is just a COVID thing. You know, it's a lot bigger picture, and it's part of a bigger picture, and it really needs investigating, and it needs working with experts and people to understand what the underlying issues are, and then actually taking action to address those underlying issues and make sure that everybody is, you know, living in a safe, clean home, that everybody has access to all the services and facilities that they need. And to really understand, you know, we need to really understand the issues. It is about working with people in the community and working with experts in these areas, and all coming together to get the solutions together to these challenges. So absolutely, that is something that I'm completely committed to, is to really understand what's going wrong and why parts, you know, some groups in our country are suffering so much more than others.
Thank you for that, Jenny. Really, you know, for engaging with that. So we have another question again related to inequalities. Muslims here in the West Midlands are living in some of the most overcrowded housing and some of the most deprived areas, as you'll know. Will you commit to creating a strategy and a plan to address this concern?
Yeah, so with housing, I mean, there really is a housing crisis in the West Midlands. And what has happened is that over a very long time, this is like decades, we haven't been building enough houses. And back in the 80s, when a lot of our council housing stock was sold off, that money was then just spent on whatever, not reinvested back into housing. So there's a real problem with housing as a whole, and particularly in terms of affordable housing. So there's a real shortage of affordable housing for people to actually be able to purchase homes, but then also we need to look at the rental sector as well. And housing for social rent in particular is, desperately short. And I've been talking to, I think when you mention the word homeless, people tend to think of rough sleepers out on the streets. But in fact, across the West Midlands, the problem, I mean, obviously rough sleeping is a problem, but there is also a real problem with hidden homelessness. And there's a real problem with people who are just, as you said, crowded into, housing that's not suitable for that number of people. There's people on housing waiting lists and who are being just moved around from one temporary accommodation to another. And this is not just individuals, it's families as well. So we have to really, really rapidly invest in building enough houses and enough affordable houses for everybody. And I think part of that is around not relying on the private sector to provide this housing. Our affordable housing quotas are not sufficient. And so I believe it really needs the public sector and the councils to step in and start building enough housing directly and start to directly invest in housing again, so that we get the housing for social rent that's really then affordable, to everybody, and so that nobody is left with, no roof over their heads, or, as you say, being crowded into, accommodation that is not suitable for that number of people. And, and it's a credit to, the Muslim community that you have a culture that supports families and everyone supports each other. And so, people aren't left wanting, they're taken in and supported by family members and by friends in the wider community, and that's great. But that then means, there's unsuitable housing situations for people where actually, people need some more space and places of their own. So it's around getting enough housing stock out there and getting social housing available.
So you recognise that it's not the community's duty to be constantly, doing that and taking people in and overcrowding houses which are already overcrowded, as it were. Exactly,
and these properties, there should be enough homes for everybody. Everybody should be able to have, a home to call their own and space of their own. So it's critical that we really get the councils now stepping in and providing that, because the way it's going at the moment with relying on public sector developers, it's just not happening fast enough.
Okay. I think Dr. Ahmed had a question.
Thanks very much for MEND for organizing this meeting today, and thanks for Jenny for attending. I'm the president of the Birmingham branch of the Muslim Association of Britain. We are a stakeholder organization, and we are a grassroots organization, and we are usually interested in the youth. We do have a wing called MAB Youth. We do a lot of activities, and but we are sort of worried about the youth unemployment rates, especially in the Midlands. Despite that, I think the youth are doing a lot of work in MAB, including, for example, currently we have a project called Badge, Believe and Do Good, which includes feeding the homeless, a campaign, doing some blood donation, cleaning the streets, etc. So I wonder, is the youth unemployment and on your agenda? On one hand, what are you planning to do for this? And those projects like the MAB Youth are doing, are you in a position to support those initiatives if you get elected?
Yeah. I mean, I think the the pandemic in particular has had a really terrible impact on our young people in terms of education. Their schooling has been disrupted, whether going to university, the university education has been disrupted. They're missing out on the sort of social interactions and relationship building and so on of that age group, and they're missing out on job opportunities, and the unemployment statistics for our young people in particular are really shocking. They're terrible, and in the West Midlands especially as well, actually. So the impact for them in terms of both just mental health of going through all this and then not being able to see prospects for them, it's really terrible. And so the key things in terms of jobs and work, I think one of the important things is to make sure that young people are getting the skills that they need to go into the world of work. There's a lot of opportunity for growth in a number of sectors, so that the sort of green environmental sector in terms of the technology and innovation that we need to build green transport, as well as actually building green infrastructure in the West Midlands. So actually building extending the metro network, for example, insulating houses, which is a priority, building new homes that we've just been talking about. There's a lot of job opportunities in the sort of green sector. As well as that, there's a lot of job opportunities in healthcare, in digital. And so for me, I think that a key thing is to really start bringing businesses and educational providers together to make sure that when young people are leaving education, they've got the skills that they need for the world of work. And so let's try and prioritize young people developing those skills. And this also applies to older workers, who are out of work as well, reskilling and retraining. Our educational providers need to connect with businesses to actually make sure people are getting the skills that they need to then go into the world of work. And there's a particular deficit in the apprenticeships that are being provided. There is lots of funding available for apprenticeships, but that's not translating into number of apprenticeships being made available. So we need to really work with businesses and understand why they're not making those apprenticeships available, and make sure that there should be apprenticeships across a whole range of different sectors and lots of different jobs, rather than just concentrating on a few areas. So apprenticeships can be used in all sorts of business. But in addition to that, there's internships, there's training and mentoring from business. So I just want to see, when people are leaving education, that there's a plan for them, so that none of them are just, out there wondering what to do next, and there's jobs and things for them. And then in addition to that, I think it's great what you're talking about in terms of the volunteering and supporting the community. That is fantastic. And also in doing those things and in working as part of our community, we also build good skills and good experience from doing that is actually valuable in terms of the world of work. And it's really important that we actually support community projects. And what I really want to see is a lot better integration across the West Midlands of different projects that are happening in different areas. So what we've got at the moment is lots of brilliant initiatives happening, in one place, in quite a small confined location. And let's try and share that better across the region, so that we've got this stuff going on all over the place. So I really want to try and expand what's happening, great things that are happening here and there, and actually make that available to everybody across the West Midlands, so that everybody is getting these great opportunities. So that it's a real challenge, but I do particularly want businesses, when they're looking at what they're doing in terms of training and development and apprenticeships and things, to be targeting specifically the disadvantaged groups and the disadvantaged parts of our community, because it's everyone knows that it's easier for people from more affluent backgrounds who've got those connections to kind of go and find those job opportunities. We need to be really helping businesses to target the most deprived communities and make sure that those young people are getting the opportunities that are available to others.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Muhammad Saad, this guy's hand raised. So if you want to ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, and thanks for Jenny. Jenny, that Muslims are underrepresented in the position for leadership and employment in the senior roles in the public sector. So what's your plan for addressing this gap?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. In terms of, I mean, there's two aspects I want to talk about: the elected representatives and then the non-elected representatives and people working in the public sector. And I think we need to do so in terms of the elected representatives first. I mean, there's some issues that apply to both actually. I think we need to be making a lot more of a conscious. We need to recognise that there's clearly inequalities and systemic racism and things going on in our institutions that are meaning that people are not having the same opportunities. And it is notable that at lower levels and at more junior levels, we get, the representation is a lot more equal, but it's as people progress through organizations into the more senior roles, that's how it just drops off. And that's all aspects of diversity, really. It's the same for gender diversity and ethnic diversity, disabled people, the whole raft of issues with that representation. So we need to really look at what's going on, and it's just taking too long. We've been talking about these things for years and years and years, and kind of putting in place some kind of, we must do a bit better about this, but it's not changing things. So I'm clear on being pretty robust in that we need to be now actually setting targets to ensure proper diversity of leadership at all levels, in all our public sector organizations and in our elected representatives as well. We need to start looking at targets. And I know nobody likes having kind of fixed targets, but it's the only way that actually makes a change and actually really changes things. So we need to be looking at when we're doing shortlisting, doing diverse shortlists and ensuring that we've got proper representation in our candidates that are applying for things. We need to proactively go out and seek people and seek diverse people and diverse candidates and make sure everyone's getting equality of opportunity. So I see this in my own work. I'm an accountant, as I said. I work for a big accountancy firm, and we have exactly the challenges within the work. We've been trying to address it for years and it's not happening. So we are now putting in some of these measures to actually set diversity targets and take steps to do those. So I think part of it is around mentoring as well, and getting really good mentors in place to identify key potential people with talent that can then be brought on and given the opportunities. Because what happens is people don't get the opportunities at a junior level, and therefore they just don't ever build those skills. And we do need to look at unconscious bias training and make sure that's really embedded in our organizations, and that we're constantly challenging ourselves and asking, why is this happening? And can we do something differently? And what is going wrong? So I really welcome the opportunity to work with you and with other organizations across the region to really tackle this underrepresentation that we're seeing. And and the same with our, as I say, our elected representatives. We need to really actually reach out into the community and ask people to come forward and to stand for election and to stand for public office.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you.
Hi, Jenny. My next question, I mean, despite the challenges of underrepresentation, you have a lot of Muslims in the West Midlands play a key role in supporting the economy through thousands of small businesses or restaurants, groceries, confectionaries, all kind of businesses that they're involved in. What support, especially in time of COVID now, will you commit to providing those businesses, especially those affected by the lockdown?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think so. The government's did some good things in terms of COVID support, in terms of the furlough scheme, for example. But a lot of that is really not filtering down to our small businesses and our entrepreneurs and our freelancers and people who are doing so much for our economy. Our shopkeepers and our restaurant owners and our taxi drivers and everybody. It's not, the support has been really inadequate for those smaller businesses, in my view. And I think, so I have been, along with my Lib Dem colleagues in government, really pushing the government to get to get more support for our small businesses, because they are absolutely fundamental to our economy. And as you say, they're doing so much. They provide jobs, they provide, you know, everybody's day-to-day services. Small businesses are fundamental to our economy, and I think they just get overlooked all the time by government. So I will continue to push and challenge government to get that support for everybody who's been particularly badly affected by the pandemic. And the sort of policies that the Liberal Democrats are talking about is revenue compensation schemes, so that you'll actually get money, grants, to cover the costs of property rent, to cover insurance costs, to cover, you know, all the costs that have still been ongoing. So you may be able to furlough staff, but there's still, you know, ongoing business costs that people are incurring. So I really want to actually see the government giving money directly to our small businesses to cover those costs and help them to get back on their feet. I also want to look at extending business rate relief schemes and extending VAT relief schemes, and the kind of temporary measures that have been put in place to be extended for a longer period to make sure that businesses have got time to recover. So all the measures that we've been putting in place over the last year, they need to really run till the end of this year, while businesses are then rebuilding and starting to reopen and get back on their feet. And all the loan schemes and things like that need to be available. And I really want to make sure there's enough funding available. Ideally, it should be grant funding that's not repayable. But otherwise, if there's then just loans that are needed, there need to be loans on really good rates, really low rates, and people given a long time to pay those back, because it's not good for businesses to be coming out of this with huge debts and thinking, how are we going to make ends meet? So we're quite limited in terms of the mayoral powers to be able to provide that support. So a lot of it is about pushing central government, asking for that for support. But what we can do locally, I think, is try and make funding accessible to people, so that people can actually get at least some hold of some local money to be able to then, you know, maintain and rebuild their businesses.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you very much. Mohammed Saad's got another question.
Yes, please. Jenny, in your view for the education system, you are committed with the party to increase the funding back to 2015 level, and also you are committed to abolishing the Ofsted system. So if that will be cancelled, what is the alternative for that, which ensure that the education system will continue on the quality level which is required? How will you ensure that?
Yeah, so I mean, school funding is something I feel very strongly about, because as a school governor, I've seen over the years how desperate it's getting within schools, and there is just got to a point now where there is not enough money for just the basics, and teachers are having to go and buy stationery and bring it into schools themselves, and actually providing things in schools themselves, and it's really terrible. So we need much better funding for our schools. In terms of the Ofsted approach, the difficulty, I think, with the way the Ofsted system is working is that really it's just ending up putting a lot of pressure on teachers and on head teachers and on teachers who are just trying to do their jobs. And just the way the system is run, it causes a lot of stress and distress when there's an Ofsted visit, and teachers are worrying about what the grade's going to be, and teachers don't need to have stress in their lives. Their job is to, you know, ensure quality teaching of our children. But of course, yes, it is important that our schools are at a certain standard and at a certain quality. So we do want to have a system that's in place to review that, but it's a lot of a much lighter touch system than the current Ofsted system, which is very just puts a lot of pressure on schools and on teachers that doesn't actually necessarily reflect, you know, what they're doing day to day in the classroom. But yeah, we don't want to abandon and have nothing, but it's just to replace the Ofsted system that's there with a much more flexible system that's more about working with schools and with teachers rather than putting that stress and pressure on them.
Thank you. It's clear.
So I think Dr. Halmi's got another question. So if you want to ask.
Yes, Jenny, I just want to ask you if you can you reassure us if elected, you will commit your party to ensuring that candidates are representative of the demographic makeup of the areas they are standing, particularly areas with high Muslim population.
Yeah, I think that it is really important that we get a better representation in our candidates, and it has been a challenge for the Lib Dems, particularly where we are quite a small party, and in finding candidates to stand. So what we really need to do is build a lot better relationships with different people across different communities and get that challenge resolved. So we do okay in council candidates, but we're not at the same level with our parliamentary representatives. So we need to be getting a lot better at getting that diversity amongst our candidates. So it is an issue we're aware of. I'm connected well in Birmingham. I know our council leader, John Hunt, very well. And I know this is something that's important to him. He's actually studied as police and crime commissioner. So I don't know if you're speaking to police and crime commissioners as well, but you know, it is something that we are conscious that we aren't doing as well on that as a party as we want to. So it is certainly within our targets to actually move the dial on that and make sure we're getting better representation. So I actually volunteer with the deputy vice president in the Lib Dems, who is responsible for diversity effectively. So she's a lady called Isabel Parasram, who's excellent, and I'm working with her on this issue alongside our racial diversity team on really tackling this issue and getting better representation. So yes, that is something that I am committed to from the point of view of our party.
Thank you.
There was a local issue that I wanted to get your view on. So over the last couple of years, Muslim parents and pupils have been witnessing serious concerns at schools. Historically, you'll probably be aware of the Trojan horse scandal, and then more recently the Anderton Park school incident as well, and other similar incidents where Muslims' religious beliefs, values, and sentiments have been mocked and discarded. How are you, if elected, will ensure that such incidents are not repeated again in the West Midlands?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we listen to everybody across the community and make sure that we're understanding people's concerns. And there shouldn't be a situation where, you know, as you're saying, people's concerns are just being disregarded. That shouldn't be happening in the West Midlands. We need to listen to everybody across our community. And where there is disagreement between different groups about issues, it's around opening that dialogue, I think. And I think it's around listening and bringing people together and actually getting proper engagement from different people with different views and talking to each other openly so that we can understand the different perspectives and find solutions together. So we need to work together on these things, not just say they're wrong, because inevitably they're just differences of opinion. They're not necessarily rights and wrongs. So for me, it's around listening to different communities, listening to different people, and really understanding where they're coming from. And by having those understandings and those open dialogues between people, that is how we resolve our differences. So it's about understanding for me. So understanding people's perspectives, understanding people's values, and then working together to find solutions that work for everybody.
Just a quick follow-up on that, actually, if you don't mind. Do you see that, you know, and I agree with you that there should definitely be dialogue, and this is definitely 100% the way forward. But where there are disagreements in these type of scenarios, the go-to for media and public figures so often is when Muslims are on one side of a particular debate, is to just shout extremism, rather than say that, okay, we may disagree with the viewpoint being espoused by these Muslim parents or these people within the Muslim community, etc., or we may agree with it partially, we disagree with it partially, disagree with it, but that's a genuine disagreement which someone can have, rather than just saying, well, oh, here we go, extremists, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that there's a media challenge around that, I think, in that there's a thing around, oh, what makes good news and what makes good stories. And so we end up with this in all sorts of spheres, actually. It makes sort of good headlines to have these big opposing views. And it makes, and it's same as, I guess, as we were talking earlier around the kind of hate crime and that kind of thing. So there's this division, there's this tendency in the media to just try and create division and different sides of the story and not represent people fairly. So it is a problem, I think, in that people just want the kind of headlines and the, you know, loud views and saying, oh, they're extremists, kind of, but it dismisses people's genuine concerns. And so we need a more collaborative approach in how we manage our communities. But it is very difficult when, as you say, the media and certain things just say them. But there's a bit of a culture of just othering people, I think, and just blaming people and not properly listening. So it is really difficult. But as politicians and people in leadership positions, we need to rise above that and show a different way of doing things and be respectful of people's different views. But, you know, politicians, unfortunately, can be as guilty as anyone of this them and us kind of mentality. And for me, even within politics, you know, I would never abuse, you know, someone I'm standing against, because that's not how I do things. So you get a lot, you make more progress if you respect people and listen to people and work together. And as leaders in our communities, we have to, you know, be better than that challenge that can happen from some groups.
Thank you, Jenny. I have just one last question before passing you on to our host, if that's okay with Shoaib. So many Muslim charities and organizations are working to improve in education, employment, community cohesion, and so many other areas here within our region. How will you work and engage with these organizations to support them?
No, that's a good question, and really I think it comes back to my sort of overriding approach to the whole of the mayoral role. It's about getting out in the community and about listening to people. So it's really key for me to actually meet with different groups and meet with different community organizations. And as I say, what I really want to do is try and learn from the great things that I've been doing and share those across the region. So I quite like to create a forum for, you know, and there are charity forums, I know, where different groups come together and really share and understand that. But for me, it's understanding what those groups are doing, understanding what support they need. And actually, we don't want, there's too many areas of our society where we're relying on charity to be, you know, providing food for people, for example. It shouldn't be coming down to charities to be doing these things. But so I think that actually by engaging with those charities and understanding what they're doing, it helps get a bigger picture of what the challenges and issues are, because they're doing great work because there's a need. And some of that need, it's right that it's done by the voluntary sector, but some of it isn't. You know, some of this stuff now is getting down to real fundamental basic human rights that should be being provided by the state, and people shouldn't be having to rely on, you know, charity to feed their kids. That really shouldn't be happening. So it's really important to get it out, and for me, get out and engage with these groups and find them and work with them on solving our problems, because only by working together and understanding the challenges can we actually, you know, make a difference. I think it's really, really important.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny. So as you can see, we're slowly running out of time. So unfortunately, we don't have any more time for questions now. I just wanted to give you a couple of minutes at the end, just to make some concluding remarks, concluding statements before we end. If that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So I just want to, thank you all for your time this afternoon and your engagement. And it's been really, it's really interesting to be able to speak to you. I mean, I don't think you're coming up with anything I don't know about, if you know what I mean. It is these issues that are concerning for us all. And I think just to go back to where I started, really, for me, having these relationships and engaging with people across our community from all different backgrounds is absolutely core to how I want to approach the role of mayor. I think at the moment, the current mayor, and he's done a lot of good things, but he's very much taking a business focused, and it's all about business and big business and the economy. The economy is of course important because that's how we get jobs. But for me, I want to take a lot more of a people-focused approach and actually understanding the people and the residents across the West Midlands, understanding people's issues and people's challenges, and then working together to come up with the solutions and the answers. So it's all about collaboration for me. It's all about engaging with residents. So meeting with organisations like yourselves is absolutely key. And I'd really want to have that ongoing relationship and discussion and two-way conversations as we move forward, because it's the only way to do things and to actually make a West Midlands that's right for everybody and that works for everybody.
That's great, thank you for that. And I think it's important that, something that you've raised a number of times throughout the meeting is having that two-way communication and having that ongoing communication. And I feel that, and I think that everyone in the room would agree that that's a vital thing for the electorate to have with candidates, to be able to have that continued ongoing two-way communication. So that's great, thank you for that. Cool, that's great. So thank you very much everyone for coming today. It's really appreciated that you've given up your time, especially on this sunny late afternoon, early evening, and hopefully we'll have more events coming up in terms of we're speaking to more candidates as we go along, kind of having these one-to-one intimate conversations with them, and sharing the message out with the community so that the Muslim community can vote for people that they feel represents their views, kind of as individuals.
Yeah, no, that's great, thank you. And whatever the outcome of the election, I'd really like to keep in touch and keep up that dialogue because it's really important. So.
Yeah, definitely. We're always open. We're always willing to have those dialogues. So by all means, like I said, whatever the kind of outcome of the election, we're always there to be. We're always there for open for conversation and talking and those types of things. That's great.
Yeah, no, that's great, lovely. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you.